first up, in our Division of Constitutional Powers and Principles region, our number 1 seed is going to be Marbury versus Madison. We put it on number 1 because it established judicial review.
Our 8th seed is Dred Scott versus Sanford, and we put it at number 8 because it endorsed slavery and denied rights to African Americans.
At our number 1 seed of the Bill of Rights region is going to be Miranda versus Arizona. We chose that because it deals with the justice system, and now when people get arrested, they get to hear their rights when they're arrested.
Our 8th seed is New York versus TLO, which deals with students' rights, and we put it at number 8 because the case is allowing students to be searched without a warrant or a probable cause when they're at school. For our civil rights and privacy region, our number 1 seed is Brown versus Board of Education because it overturned Plessy versus Ferguson and has a lasting impact on not segregating schools.
Number 8 seed is going to be Texas versus Johnson, and we chose this as number 8 because it dealt with the burning of the flag, and it said that it was a part of freedom of speech, but many people viewed it as offensive.
Our first seed for political process region is Citizens United versus FEC, which deals with campaign finance. And we chose it as number 1 because it heavily allows money to play a role in politics, and you get to campaign financially.
In our number 8 seed, it's gonna be Gitlow versus New York. This is gonna be our number 8 because it dealt with freedom of speech being allowed in the states, but it just added on to the Bill of Rights that was already there, so it wasn't as important because it was selective other than the other Supreme Court cases.
Our next close game was between Miranda versus Arizona and Gideon versus Wainwright, and they were both close because they dealt with trials and attorneys. So Gideon was too poor to afford a lawyer, and now because of this case, everyone is provided an attorney, whether they are rich or poor. And then for Miranda versus Arizona, whenever you are convicted of a crime, you are listening to your Miranda rights before, so you know what you have rights of before.
In our Sweet 16 round, we had a couple close games. The first one's going to be between our number 1 and our number 2 seed, Marbury versus Madison versus McCulloch versus Maryland. This one was a super close game because Marbury versus Madison established judicial review, and McCulloch versus Maryland established the necessary and proper clause, but in the end, Marbury versus Madison took the win. So now our biggest upset was between Citizens United and Tinker versus Des Moines. Citizens United was ranked 1, and Tinker versus Des Moines was ranked 7, and Tinker versus Des Moines ended up winning because it dealt with students and their First Amendment rights in school, and as long as it wasn't interrupting the school day, they were allowed to silently protest. In the end, Miranda versus Arizona ended up winning. Our first game of the Elite 8 was between Marbury versus Madison and U.S. versus Nixon. It was a super tight matchup because Marbury versus Madison dealt with judicial review, and then U.S. versus Nixon was an important case in presidential power where he was forced to share his tapes. In the end, Marbury versus Madison won and is headed to the Final Four.
Next, we had a rivalry game between Brown versus Board of Education and Plessy versus Ferguson. Plessy versus Ferguson wanted separate but equal facilities, and then Brown versus Board ended up taking the win because now we have no segregation in schools.
Now heading into our Final Four, our 4 last teams are Marbury versus Madison, Miranda versus Arizona, Brown versus the Board of Education, and Tinker versus Des Moines. Now we are heading into our final game. It is between Brown versus the Board of Education and Marbury versus Madison. Brown versus the Board of Education dealt with not segregating children in schools and allowing African American and white children to be included together. Expect really good things out of Brown versus Board because it already overturned Plessy versus Ferguson and won that game. So now we expect that they will be able to handle this matchup well. In the public perception, it is widely celebrated as one of the largest U.S. Supreme Court cases to ever happen.
And it has a lot of fans.
It's a fan favorite.
And the other team is Marbury versus Madison, and it is also going to be a very good competitor because it is viewed as one of the most important cases in the United States history, and it set the role for the judicial branch in government and it set the scene for judicial review, which is still existing today.
And the winner is Brown versus the Board of Education.